Welcome to Better Sex, where you get the information and inspiration to create and enjoy your best possible sex life. Join your host, sex therapist Jessa Zimmerman, as she brings you expert guests, helpful tips, knowledge, and strategies to improve your intimate relationships. And now, your host, Jessa Zimmerman.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Better Sex Podcast. This is Jessa, and I'm so glad you're here with me. We are diving in today to a luscious topic. Natalie Surmeli is here with me, and she runs the Tribe of Wolves, and we're talking all about stepping into your feminine wild. So diving into pleasure and your desires and your need and longing to be seen, partly by slowing down and getting into your body. So she's going to be talking about pleasure practices and her approach to this and why it matters and all that stuff. And it really fits nicely with the Intimacy with Ease method, because in the second pillar of that, which is align, it's about getting to know yourself and how you're interacting with your partner, and also really examining sort of what you've brought into your relationship. And as she talks about in the episode, she brought in Catholic upbringing and the youngest of 3 kids, only having brothers, and being a mom herself in a marriage and falling into depression and realizing she's really had never learned to do any of this. And it was a big factor in her being on the verge of divorce, actually. So there's a whole element of the method where you really have to take apart what you've brought into your relationship and what's impacting your ability to really connect sexually with your partner. And then, of course, my favorite part of the method is the fact that you have to practice new ways of being, which she's also going to talk about, because change really is experiential, right? It's not just that insight and reflection. It's about implementing practices that give you a chance to integrate new ways of being, new ways of thinking, new ways of behaving. So she's going to sort of straddle those two with this idea of tapping into feminine energy of slowing down, of desire, of surrender, of joyfulness, and how to actually start to make that happen in your life. So I hope you get a lot out of the show. And before we start the show today, it is sponsored by Intimacy with Ease. It's a method to help otherwise happy couples achieve a sex life that is easy and fun for both of them, so that you can actually just enjoy your sex life with zero stress. For more information, if you want to watch a brief little training video that's available, all of that, go to intimacywithease.com. So Natalie, thanks so much for being on the show with me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Jessa. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So let's just start with a little bit of your story. You know, what's brought you into this work? Why are you doing what you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think about 6 years ago I was a mom of 3, still am.
Good.
Yeah, married, but in a state of depression and kind of lost. I found myself kind of overwhelmed with the daily tasks of life. My relationship with my husband was kind of on the brink of divorce. And, a therapist had said to me, you need to slow down. You need to slow down. But try yoga, try meditation. I thought it sounded like woo-woo BS 6 years ago. Now it's become, more mainstream. But at the time, I wasn't quite ready to hear his suggestions. Anyway, I found myself unable to sleep, with using Xanax and maybe a cocktail of Chardonnay and Xanax to fall asleep at night.
Wow.
And life just felt dim. So I did eventually take his advice, our therapist's advice, and went to my first yoga class where I proceeded to cry on my mat.
Wow.
And the world, I just began to crack open. began to crack open and really, really receive this information that I did, in fact, need to slow down. And when I did, my life began to shift.
Yeah. So you mentioned woo, like at least 6 years ago. Maybe these things were more woo than they're thought of now, or it was woo to you, but you've transitioned right into to more open to this stuff. But like your background, right, is as a scientist, right, or at least your degree or your training.
It is. And so I think that's why, Jessa, this was so hard for me to accept because, all of my beliefs were based in fact. I believe I needed a research paper to prove to me that something was going to work or was even worth trying.
Okay.
And I grew up in an Italian-American house with older brothers. I was the youngest of 3. So my belief was that you really needed to power through, to work hard, to buck up. There was no such thing as luck. And, that was this kind of badass, if you will, nature that I walked into my marriage and my life with. And it was hard, for a long time to rectify these two ideas that there was this universe who was guiding me, but I couldn't, there was no
research paper.
There was no research paper or evidence actually suggesting that. But when I did begin to, surrender, to slow down, and I began to read spiritual texts that were kind of guiding me in this direction. And then, Jessa, I went back and actually did a little bit of research, and I researched the Big Bang and the fact that there is, energy, the same energy flowing through us that is flowing through the trees, that makes up our universe, makes up all life. And then I was able to really understand that the way I move through the world matters. The energy I'm sharing with the world matters. The way I wake up in the morning matters. My thoughts matter. And it all started to kind of come together and make sense.
Yeah.
To me. And then,
yeah. So talk a little bit more about that. Like, what have you unlocked and learned, and how do you sort of structure your thinking around this, or deliver? Like, what have you come to with the practices so far?
Yeah. So what has happened is I've come to the realization that we don't create delicious, luscious lives filled with, great sex by doing more and working harder. And that what I've come to understand is that actually we create the life we want to live by slowing down and doing less of the busyness and more of the things that fill us up. And that's why, I work with women on these pleasure practices to help them slow down, get in touch with their desires, and lead their lives from that place. And that, inevitably leads you to more intimacy in your relationships and a much better sex life.
Yeah. So before we dive into the pleasure practices, because I definitely want to talk about those, is this different for men and women, or wherever somebody is on gender, identity?
No, not at all. I mean, this is about slowing down and really diving into yourself first. No matter where you are in the gender spectrum or who your partner is, it's really about getting to know yourself. And I think what I learned is by slowing down, by practicing yoga and meditation and movement, I was able to kind of tease out what my own desires were. And from that place, once I had, in my hands, in my head, in my heart, what my own desires were, then the next stage was to really get brave enough to share those desires with my partner. So I would say there was probably 4 years of my practice of diving into myself before I had the chutzpah to speak any of this to my partner.
Wow.
So this was not a, like, take a yoga class, save my marriage.
Right.
This was years of slowing down and waiting and writing and dancing and figuring out what I really wanted for my life. It's funny, Jess, I recently found, or my husband actually found an old journal of mine. And he opened it. We can talk about that.
Not sure how you feel about that from the way you're sitting.
Yeah, we can talk about that on there. But in this journal from years ago, I was writing entry after entry about what I desired in a relationship. And it was years before I ever spoke those words to him. So the date on the pages were 2-3 years before I ever uttered those words to him. So it's, I call it with my clients, it's an unfolding. Yeah. Really.
But you described being on the verge of divorce, and then it's years before you're starting to show up and ask, talk about what you want. How did you make it through those years together?
Yeah, good question. So it's funny because my father is a divorce lawyer.
Oh gosh.
I know. And he said to me at one point, and I held this true to me. He said, it was an Albert Einstein quote, "You keep showing up doing the same thing, but expecting different results." My father was encouraging me to change my ways.
Yeah.
He said, nothing in your relationship will change if you don't change yourself first.
Right.
Also said to me, very wise man, why are you rushing to get divorced? What's the rush?
Yeah.
You don't need to rush into this. So I made a commitment that I was going to take the time. And at the end of the day, what I wanted was a happy family.
Right.
And that became clearer and clearer to me as I began to do this work, that was my desire. Mm-hmm. My desire was not to have a broken family. My desire was to have a partner who saw me. My desire was to have a luscious sex life. My desire was to feel alive in my body and to love my body, to have a good relationship with my kids and to lead my family. So as these things became clearer to me, the divorce, moved further and further away. And my husband and I are still working on our relationship. I don't think that, there's no such thing as done.
Right.
Anyone who's married knows that it's beautiful and it's a roller coaster. Yeah.
Yeah. I talk about it in our comfort cycles where we get to just sort of enjoy and coast and reap the rewards of our work. And then we go into growth cycles where we got to dig in and transform again,
Exactly. And if you're partnered with someone who's willing to do the work.
Right.
And do the work that you're doing, then you're able to grow together. And I think what I learned, over those 4 years is that my partner was willing to do the work. Yeah. He was starting to meditate. He was seeing how I was calmer and taking cues from me. So, we started to come together.
Yeah. So would he have also shared your dissatisfaction, like with your sex life specifically, but even in general at that point too? Was he also unhappy and struggling with the same kinds of things? Or was this a surprise to him that you were so unhappy?
No, it was no surprise. We had been in therapy for years.
Yeah.
And we just kept repeating the same patterns. Mm-hmm. But I think it took one of us to kind of shake it up.
Right.
To say, I'm done.
Yeah.
And for one of us to change. Right? Like one person needs to initiate the change. And, we're both from traditional families who there was not really divorce in our families on either side. So for us to get to split would have been a very big deal.
Yeah.
And so I think, I was just the first one to call it. I don't think that he was quite ready to call it yet.
Yeah.
But dissatisfaction with sex life, what I've learned, Jessa, and this is something that I share with the women in my tribe, is that your partner male, female, wherever they are on the spectrum, it is their desire to please you.
Mm-hmm.
And this was like such an eye-opener for me that actually it was his greatest pleasure to please me.
Right. And yet, not his responsibility, which is something I
No.
say to clients all the time. You're responsible for your own pleasure. You just have to enlist your partner.
Exactly. And that's where this introspection, comes from, learning what we like.
Yeah.
Taking the time to explore ourselves.
So talk a little bit about these pleasure principles. That's what you call them, right? Or pleasure practices.
Yeah.
Right?
So
like
what do those look like?
Yeah. What do those look like? Is there sort of a structure to this, or are these just sort of ideas that people could take?
Yeah, well, it can look different for any particular woman, but one that I love is a self oil massage, and I tell women I want them to take 45 minutes, and they have to use the entire time. Not 43 minutes, not 17 minutes, but they must use 45 minutes of time to explore their own bodies. And this is like research, really.
Yeah.
It's self-research into your own body. And, what you might discover is that, the spot under your armpit is like, whoa, a place that's on fire. So you explore different parts of your bodies. Another practice that we do in community a lot is a dance practice. And with our eyes closed to, any particular song, it's usually something soft and sensual, and exploring how your emotions move through your body. So getting in touch with how things feel, how things feel in your body. And we move so quickly through life that it is rare that someone slows down to actually feel the movement of energy in your body.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what else do we do? I tell women, we do mirror staring, practices in the morning. I still do this to myself. I look in the mirror and say, Natalie, you're fucking gorgeous. Pardon my language.
No, that's fine.
I adore you. You are doing great. Today's a new day. Let's do this.
Yeah.
And it's this recognition of yourself that, like, I'm here with you and I support you. So, and there's a million other things. I mean, women spend time exploring their vulva, right? I mean, who knew? I didn't know until 6 years ago that my clitoris had 8,000 nerve endings. And they're only used for pleasure.
Right.
That's the only purpose.
Right.
But these are things we're not taught.
Yeah.
These are things we're not taught as young women. And they're so important.
Okay, we're going to just take a short little break here, and I want to let you know about Intimacy with Ease, the method that helps otherwise happy couples create a sex life that is fun, easy, light for both people. So if you are an otherwise happy couple, if sex is the elephant in the room or sex is the little bit of the challenge for you guys, you may want to check this out. You can go to intimacywithease.com and you'll see information there. You'll see short videos. You'll have access to a full webinar about it, all kinds of information to let you know if this would be the right thing for you. So besides some of these, they almost sound like not quite exercises, but if I'm going to do something intentional to practice pleasure. Are there also sort of moment-to-moment ways you encourage people to tune into what they want or what they're doing, or it's just mindfulness, but it's like how to access desire in all the moments of our lives, not just about learning about our physical body.
Yes. So generally we talk about awareness practices, right? How we're moving through the world. And again, we talk about busyness, but thinking about the things that ignite you or make you feel good. right? So those are simple things like, when I was a kid, I spent all my time in the woods. So somehow I lost that piece of myself in motherhood and life and a full-time job, that when I started kind of reconnecting with myself, I realized, wow, I need to go back to the simple, pleasurable things that bring me joy. And from kind of a woo-woo perspective or the law of attraction perspective, raise my vibration and allow me to move through the world lit up the way I want to be lit up. So exploring things from your childhood that you love to do, or trying something new. So, every day I say to myself, what's the big three? What are the big three things I need to do today? And I write them down. They're always like work or family related. And then besides those three things, I'm going to add in some pleasure to my day. And it doesn't mean, necessarily a hot oil massage, but it could mean, for me, it's usually a walk in the woods.
Yeah.
Or it's going to the tea store in my town and blending a delicious tea and taking it home. For me, that's my tea is a pleasure practice. So when you start to practice infusing your everyday life with the things that you just enjoy, you begin to recognize what desire is. Right? What are the things that make you feel good? So I would say that's the kind of the top layer. And, as you continue to do that, you can kind of bring it down to sexuality and sensuality. But first you need to start with like the simple mundane things, like, putting lotion on your feet before you put your socks on. And noticing how good it feels.
Yeah. And it's really an interesting idea that people should be maybe not scheduling like a certain time, but making sure that on their list every day are things that are just about pleasure.
Yes.
Just about happiness and joy and,
yes,
instead of a constant to-do list that we can never finish.
Why else are we here?
Yeah.
Why else are we here? Like your life on this planet is limited. You better freaking enjoy it.
So what do you say to women that are, but wait, I've got a full-time job. I've got 3 kids. I've got this husband or wife or, life is just, this isn't the time. I'm too busy. There's too much going on. I'll get to this later.
Yeah.
Maybe. Right.
Yeah. I say, well, life's all about choices.
Yeah.
So most women find me because they know it's time. So I actually don't have those conversations too often. Right. Because by the time they're reaching out to me, they are saying, I want to make a commitment. Because really, Jessa, it is a commitment. Like we women spend all of our times pushing our energy out, right? We're taking care of our kids. We're taking care of our neighbors. We're taking care of our partners. We're doing our jobs. And we have forgotten to take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
So we're frazzled and overwhelmed. So if a woman comes to me and says, but what if, I say, yes, and make the choice.
Yeah.
That's it. It's pretty simple.
And if people were to ask you, like, what's the benefit? I mean, I have, of course, my own answer to this, of focusing on sexual pleasure and satisfaction, right? Like, why should I care? Like, in my sex therapy practice, sometimes there's somebody there that's just sort of like, I just want to get through it, equip me to sort of have sex for my partner and it can be part of my life, but it's not really for me. I know, which is always sort of heartbreaking, but
I've been there. I've actually been there.
Yeah.
And because I used to, if you have kids and a partner, at some point it was like checking the box.
Right.
Right. And sometimes, let's be honest, sometimes your partner wants sex and you don't, but you also want your partner to feel good. Right. So you are going to just kind of surrender and give him or her what you want. But
that's different to me.
That's different. That is different. Yeah. But there is ultimate, intimate connection. I mean, I believe that it is our greatest desire as human beings to be seen. And there's no other place you are seen more than with physical, sexual, sensual intimacy. So there is such joy in exploring someone else's body. There is such joy in surrendering to allowing someone else to explore your body. It is so life-giving that, what I find is that when women start doing these practices and diving into this, work of the feminine and surrendering, that they learn. I mean, I get phone calls saying, "Oh my God, yes." Finally.
Yeah.
I got there. So,
right. And how does this tie to the feminine energy specifically versus, I don't know, universal energy? Like what's your take on that?
Yes. So, when I started kind of coming into these practices, what I learned is that, our energy within all human beings is split into the masculine and the feminine energy. And the feminine energy is the energy of surrender, of ease, of flow, and of desire and creation. So it is your feminine energy that is telling you to slow down and to steep in your desires, to surrender to your desires. And it is our masculine energy that's telling us to go forward, achieve, strive, right? And we need both. Mm-hmm. But our society, we honor this masculine achieving, going, crossing things off our list. So what I'm teaching women is to dive into the other aspect of your energy, the feminine piece of your energy, which is telling you to slow down, to notice your emotions, to notice how things feel in your body. So this is true for men and women. Mm-hmm. Regardless of gender. So that's how the feminine kind of weaves into these practices.
Right. And then how are you, you've got teenage daughters, right?
Yes, I do.
One of my favorite things to talk about is how we share about sexuality with our kids and set them up to have a totally different relationship to their bodies and sex than we might have gotten, right? Like it's such a powerful place. Like how are you bringing this teaching of these experiences to them, like just as a mom, in your own life?
That's an awesome question. I remember the first conversation I actually had with my daughters. They were 12 and 13, and I had just read a book. I don't know if you know Mama Gina or the book Pussy, but it's about exploring your own sexuality and your body. And I realized after reading that book years ago that I was so disconnected from my own pleasure, from my own body from an early age. I grew up in a Catholic household. No one talked about your body. Your body was shameful. I mean, you covered your body. I began talking to my daughters about masturbation. And the conversation that we have over and over is that it is their responsibility to take care of their bodies and to explore their own pleasure first before inviting a partner into the mix. Now, whether or not they take my advice or not,
right?
These are the conversations we have. I make little side jokes about masturbation. I encourage them to talk about it. We just talk about spending time with ourselves before we introduce a partner into the mix, which is not the conversations we were having as kids.
Right.
I mean, I remember some of my first experiences, watching, it was Magnum PI, actually. It really did it for me when I was a kid. And being with a babysitter and having my hand on my vulva and being sent to my room.
Wow.
And the shame that overcame me in that moment, thinking, wow, this is wrong.
Yeah.
And, what I'm feeling is wrong. I just don't want my teenage daughters to have, I'm fairly 99% certain they don't feel that way.
Yeah.
Teenagers today are freer.
Right.
They just are. So,
and I imagine you're also talking to them about, centering pleasure in their own life, not just sexual pleasure, but just pleasure and joy and fulfillment in general, and slowing down, and some of these same messages around.
And it is a hard conversation to have, especially I live in a very high achieving area outside of Boston. So the norm is to fill every moment of every day with an activity or some extracurricular club sport, or, to have these kids so scheduled that, again, it's this masculine achieving mindset.
Right.
And what my husband have done since they were little is, we decided we wanted time as a family unit. So as hard as that has been, our kids aren't in extra math classes or club sports, but instead we retreat to the mountains because that's pleasurable for us.
Right.
Now that's hard because you do have this fear, right? That sets in that like, you're not going to be, kids aren't going to be far enough ahead.
They're falling behind. Yeah.
Right. They're falling behind. But this is what I love about, COVID is that we are experiencing this great pause, which is telling us to reassess, where we are spending our energy and our time. So, in regards to pleasure for the kids, yes, we encourage them to follow the things that excite them. We have an art studio in the basement that's filled with paints and metal sculpting things. And, there's always things to dive into here that are new and exciting. And we encourage that. And as much as we want our kids to do well in school, we haven't been super intense. They might disagree, but I would say we're not the norm as far as pushing achievement in that area, but making space for them to explore other interests.
Yeah. So where, maybe you could talk just a little bit about Tribe of Wolves and where people can find you or what you've got available for anybody that's interested who's listening.
Yes. Well, we have an awesome private Facebook group right now, which is really delicious and on fire. And I'm in there every week going live and teaching. The community is awesome. So I would encourage people to go there. And also our website, we have a free wild guide on our website, which is an introduction into some of these practices. And that's at tribeofwolves.co/wild guide. So those would be two awesome places to start to get to know more about the work we're doing, to get women to step out of overwhelm and into their bodies.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's been really, really great connecting. Go ahead.
It was a pleasure to chat with you. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
You've been listening to Better Sex. Please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, for show notes and additional episodes.
And that's a wrap for today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, if some of this material resonates with you and you would like to make a difference and make sure that this keeps coming out in the world once a week, ongoing, there are a couple things you could do to show your appreciation. The first would be to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. That really helps us be found by new listeners when you review the show on iTunes. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/iTunes. The other thing I want to invite you to consider is becoming a Patreon. For a small monthly pledge, you get some benefits. So for $2 a month, you get advance access to every single episode. For $5 a month, you get a chapter of my upcoming new book. And for $10 a month, I host quarterly get to know you and question and answer chats over the web, and you get invited to that. I would love to have your membership in that, become part of the Better Sex family. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/Patreon, which is Patreon. Again, thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. Feel free to comment, ask questions, get in touch. I'd love to hear from listeners. Thanks.